I love going deep on this stuff. Like I love kind of, just trying to get under the surface of the character or of the story. Like what's the story here, and how can you kind of tell that story musically?
It is time.
Hey Bill, how do you know a lot about Henry Mancini?
Oh yeah.
And this is from the fan pick from Robert Walter, founding member of the Grey Boy All Stars. Have you heard of them?
Yeah. No shit.
So he wanted to bring this one along. He said, this song has amazing sonics and orchestration. It's like a 1960s score music. It's from the album Experiment in Terror movie soundtrack from Henry Mancini from 1962. This one is called Experiment in Terror, and you're listening to it here on Galaxy Jams Reacts. It sounds like a Western.
Like a Western noir.
Loved it.
Yeah. It is like a Western noir.
I love the instrumentation. Oh. Woo. Wow.
They bring those 60s strings. Those are 60s sounding strings.
Yeah, and those are not VSTs. Those are
of course, those are
real recorded strings. That's
Absolutely.
cool.
1962. They didn't know what VST was.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, what experience? What things do you like about Henry Mancini, Bill?
Oh man, I mean the instrumentation. I mean, just that orchestration there, the melody and the strings is glorious, man. Yeah, I'm a massive Henry Mancini fan. I feel like I was kind of, in many ways, I got into orchestral music through cinema initially. So, and Mancini is a big part of that. I mean, obviously John Williams too, but like these kind of big overarching melodies, and I think music for me was always about escapism from the beginning, and I think movies was a big part of that. So when I'm writing, I'm trying to create a world, I'm trying to create a kind of somewhere, kind of take the audience somewhere, try and take them to physically out of where they are, yeah, I mean, obviously, Pink Panther and all the classics.
Oh,
man.
yeah.
He was the kind of the go-to guy, right?
Oh, absolutely. I love the Pink Panther music, Pink Panther movies and music. I remember growing up on that and listening to those, and I was very much into that myself. And you've done some film scoring yourself, right? I know you've done. Recently you did something for David Crosby, correct?
I did, yeah, I did. I co-wrote the score with a guitarist called Marcus Eaton, and we did the score for his documentary, which was great actually. It's a very different discipline though, like writing for scoring for film versus making albums. Obviously, it's kind of really just about realizing the vision of the director. That's the goal. So you kind of have to be aligned with the director and be on the same page, and then you're kind of working as a team to to realize the story, you know, reinforce the story, which is kind of a very different way of coming at the music versus just kind of writing the music that you know, that kind of the first thing that comes into your head, you know, or at least, or when I'm like making my own records, it's like the concept has to come from the album as opposed to the film, right? So it's like you have to kind of double down on what the music's trying to say if it's my own record. Whereas when you're scoring a film, it's like you're just reinforcing the story. So you are the characters. You know, each melody represents. I remember, like, you know, there were certain themes associated with certain characters, and you just kind of really try and get, you know, really go deep on the character and just try to kind of, you know, be the character yourself and imagine them as a piece of music, you know, which is very different to just.
So do you get the film? Do you get a copy of the film and then you start writing for the film while watching it? How do you go about doing that when you're scoring for a film?
Depends, man. I mean, it can go lots of different ways. I mean, it often depends on budget initially, but like, ideally, you know, you're there from the beginning as the script is being written, and you're kind of, you're sort of, you know, you're part of the process from the very beginning. I mean, but that's obviously a long process, a long drawn out process. I mean, the films I've done, I've basically been scoring to the first edit, so already have a sense of, you know, how it's going to feel visually, and then you're kind of basically like writing to a kind of provisional cut, so which actually, you know, debatably is also easier because you're obviously, it's all about hitting the cues and hitting transitions and stuff, and so ideally that all needs to be set in stone, so that, you know, you can kind of sculpt around what the edit that's there as opposed to kind of going back the other way. But yeah, it can go either way though, honestly. I love going deep on this stuff. Like, I love kind of, you know, just trying to get under the surface of the character or of the story. Like, what's the story here, and you know, how can you kind of tell that story musically?
Right, because I feel like when you're writing your own album, you're the picture, but when you're writing music for a film, it's kind of like the film is the picture and you're the frame around the picture, and you have to kind of operate in the constraints of, you know, the budget and, you know, what the other people want and how it all fits with the movie, which I feel like exercises an entire other part of your brain when it comes to composing.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I guess that's also the kind of beauty of it, in the sense that it opens up every single genre or instrument under the sun. I did a score for this Cuban film called The Translator in Traductor, which is a true story. These twin brothers, it was the first film that they directed, and it was about the true story of their own biological father, who'd been a translator for child victims of the Chernobyl disaster, who'd been flown from Russia to Cuba. And so he had to translate in like Russian for these Russian parents what was going on with their kids in this hospital. And so these twin brothers made this film about, it was a true story about what had happened to their own dad, their biological dad. And so there was one of the lead characters was this Russian this Russian boy who was kind of the lead guy that the father figure kind of ended up befriending through the film. And so I kind of researched different Russian instruments, and I found this really interesting Russian sort of string instrument that was kind of his instrument that, you know, followed whenever he was on screen. You kind of there was that instrumentation in there, and, you know, I'm just trying to kind of, you know, represent these cultures and you know, these different sounds, you know, that again was, you know, were I not to be doing film music, like film music opens up that world in a whole new way, you know.
Yeah, because when you're writing a regular album, there's not that many scenarios where you'd need to think that kind of way. Or let's say there's like a sad moment or a happy moment and you have to compose, you know, to augment that. There's not a lot of ways that when you're making like a studio album that you're going to be thinking that way, unless it's like a concept album type of deal anyway.
That's it. Although actually I would say, you know, I think a lot of writing for film inspired me to actually become more focused on concept in terms of an album, because just as you said, it's like if there isn't a film, and if you're just making an album of your own, then you kind of have to make it's like you're making a film by yourself, right? That's
Yeah.
kind of how I see it. And so without any pictures.
Right.
So like, you know, I'm trying to tell that kind of story. I'm trying to get that sense of escapism when I'm creating something. And so now I find, like, conceptually I'm much more I'm more focused on trying to have a clear concept before I actually start writing, and then I give myself a kind of clear parameter within which to create, and then that kind of sets the tone, and that leads me down the path, and it kind of allows me to write more prolifically in a way. I think by giving yourself a kind of a brief within which to write. You know.
Thank you so much for that insight, Bill. Let's jump back into the song.
Cool.
You know, imagine seeing like a wet street at night. It kind of reminds me of like New York City.
Oh, yeah. Looking cigarettes.
Yeah. Smoking a cigarette and looking at like the hazy neon from like
by a lamppost.
Yeah, a lamppost down the street.
Ooh. What instrument is that right there at the end?
Some kind of zither. I think.
It's a nice touch.
Really cool.
Yeah, that song definitely paints a picture, just like you guys were talking about. Like the imagery in that is just really strong.
Yeah.
Neon sign, wet street. You know, you can see that without you guys even having to mention it. It just comes to mind.
Yeah, it's cool.
And
It is, right.
another thing I was thinking about when we were listening to this is that it was recorded in 1962, and you can tell there's so many artifacts in there which can demonstrate the constraints of the technology, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like in modern days, there's a lot of people that are chasing that sound now. You know, whether it is like adding like tape hiss or adding like those little boops and bleeps that come with like a record that's been played way too much. And I feel like it's hard, it's so endearing to listen to something like this, which has all of those artifacts in it. And just like thinking about how so many people try and replicate that sound even today.
It is interesting, isn't it? Why is that? What are we trying to go back to? Because everyone, like, you know, I've just got this new piano. I think it's called Tone Audio, and it's a piano VST, but it's got like a wobble on it, you know. And, and
Right.
once it's like, as soon as you put it on, it's really, really hard to take it off, you know. And there's just it's kind of like a return to it's just wanting to go back to that sort of analog. I think, but with everything having become so digital, I think there's this now renewed sort of desire for things to be more real, and I think that's about the kind of vinyl kind of wobble, right? It's about things being more tactile, more tangible. I don't know, man. I don't know why we crave it.
Yeah.
We're seeing that in the synth world too. Like a lot of people are going back to analog synths. I'm seeing like a lot of interest in that as opposed to just sticking with digital. And I'm guessing that's the same phenomenon as people just wanting to go back to that analog sound.
Yeah.
Totally.
And I feel like when you're sitting in the studio and you're working on a snare sound for 50 hours, you get like this kind of like sterile, you lose like a lot of the essence of like what songwriting is. I feel like people focus so much on the micro, but before it was like a macro type of process. And I felt like it kind of made it more human when the songwriting process before, you know, computers and quantization and things like that.
So it's just we're craving the real, you know. We're craving the real, the thing that makes it feel alive, you know.
Yeah. I feel like people get caught up in making things like a puzzle, and they're trying to, you know, put that puzzle in like all the perfect pieces in the perfect places, instead of taking a look back and seeing like what the puzzle, like the image behind the whole puzzle should be more important than making sure every single puzzle piece is like exactly where it's supposed to be.
That's it, and I feel more and more that's actually what I'm trying to kind of access with on stage and in the studio. Actually, is the kind of the vulnerable places where things aren't quantized and things aren't grid locked,
Right.
and where because it's the space in between where the magic is. I think it's and certainly where like things aren't there's like a lack of certainty. I would say certainly in terms of performing, both with my band but also with Snarky Puppy. Like it's like what we're trying to do is create a moment where no one really knows where we're going to end up, and it's like that's kind of what we're actually trying to get. That's what we're kind of aiming for. And it's like just trying to kind of, that's talking more about it from a kind of improvisatory point of view, but like it's about this aspiration to sort of not always be in control of things and actually just kind of allow things to happen naturally.
Thank you so much.
That's it.
Thank you so much for that, Bill. Hi, this is Mike with Galaxy Jams Reacts. We hope that you enjoyed that React video. Be sure to check out the links below of when we're going to be live streaming our next show and also how to watch full episodes. Please hit that subscribe button. Every single one helps.